Good afternoon, everyone. Anthony Locke with Torrey Hills Capital, and welcome to the Gladiator Metals webcast for January 29th, 2026. Hope everyone's doing well. Thanks for taking the time today to join our virtual lunch. We're very happy to present Gladiator Metals, a high potential copper story that's really been capturing the attention among early stage resource investors. Gladiator is advancing its district scale Whitehorse Copper project in the Yukon, a 35-kilometer historic copper belt with multiple high-grade targets led by its flagship Cowley Park prospect and supported by the Chiefs Trend, Arctic Chief, and Best Chance Discoveries. Company has already shown some major high-grade mineralization with an aggressive drill program expected for 2026. Company trades on the OTC under the ticker GDTRF and on the Venture under the ticker GLAD, GALAD, and it's currently trading with a market cap of only about 90 million US with an aggressive exploration program in place. 100 million plus ton high grade copper deposit potential in a fantastic jurisdiction. We feel there's plenty of potential upside in the stock, and of course, copper over $6 a pound doesn't hurt either. With us today to discuss Gladiator Metals operations and strategy going forward is the company's president, Marcus Harden. Marcus, thanks for joining us today and bringing everybody up to speed on all the great things happening at Gladiator. Before I turn it over to Marcus, I just want to mention, I think everybody knows the format. If you have a question, type it into the Q&A or chat box, and we will make sure it gets answered. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Marcus Harden. Marcus, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anthony, for that introduction. Yeah, as Anthony says, Gladiator is a pre-resource copper company operating in the Whitehorse Copper district. We're pretty much the only company there, and this is our sole asset. We're located just outside of Whitehorse, so roughly within about 25 kilometers of the regional center up there. It's a previously producing district operated through from 1967 to 1982. Hudbay ran a very small operation there. Produced about 10.5 million tons, but at good grade at 1.5% copper and coming on a gram a ton gold. Exploration at the time was very much focused on tons to the mill. So very much driven by what was outcropping, what could be easily accessed, and what could they put through that would displace current feed to the mill. So I think this really represents the first time there's been a dedicated team applying itself to the district and exploring its full potential. We've got about 35 kilometers of strike under tenure, running roughly northwest southeast. We're focused on skarn deposits, so the principal targeting vector is the contact between an intrusion out to the east and the country rocks out to the west. And generally, most of our prospects and deposits occur within about 150 meters of that. It's got, because as a previously producing district, it's got excellent access. It's got a haul road that runs the full length of the property already. So we can actually access the full property all year round. Although we currently have stopped the rigs just to compile all of our exploration data from last year before going back out next month. As a broad overview, we're fully financed. We've got about $22 million in the bank. We've got about 50,000 meters of diamond drilling planned this year. So we're going to be pretty aggressive with the drill bit on the district. Our overall objectives for this year are to put first resources onto the project. We have an advanced prospect down here in the southeast called Cowley Park, as Anthony mentioned. I would say that's probably 95% drilled out towards inferred, but with a significant portion of that coming into indicated in our maiden resources. Overall, we're targeting about 100 million tons from the belt, whilst trying to maintain that historical grade of around 1% copper equivalent. Cowley Park won't get there on its own, but it will be a significant part of that, of getting us on the road to that, and we're very excited by the exploration upside as well. One of the great things about being close to town is that we operate very cost efficiently. Our all-in exploration drill costs are about $250 a meter, and that's a true all-in. That's drilling plus assays plus geologists and so forth. So a lot of benefits, and obviously as we start to progress the project through resources to eventual PFS, then we've got existing roads on the property, existing power lines across the property, and a skilled workforce in what is essentially a mining territory out of Whitehorse as well. So a lot of structural advantages.
Marcus, if you can go back to that slide, one of the
Yeah,
questions that came in is outside of Cowley Park, what excites you the most w- uh, with
great.
regards to
Yeah.
the other sites?
No, thanks for that question. Yeah, so we've got about four sort of lead projects down the belt, which are highlighted in with the gold tickers. Outside of Cowley Park, the kind of most advanced area is actually the Chiefs Trend, which is where the bulk of historical production came from. There's probably around 7 million tons at 1.5% in residual deposits there. But we're really looking to expand that and assess its full potential. Um, Likewise, the Arctic Chief Trend, we've got defined mineralization outcropping over about 2 kilometers. And we've started to drill some significant intercepts into that trend. But actually, most recently, and we'll get into this later on, but we put our first drilling into a new target on what's termed the Cub Trend. And we put 5 holes into that, which we released at the beginning of this month. The best one of which was coming on 45 meters at 1.8% copper and almost a gram a ton gold. The reason that one is really exciting to us is essentially a new discovery undercover, which has been driven by our geophysical programs that we developed last year. And I can't remember the last time I did a drill program where our first 5 drill holes hit significant intercepts. So very excited about what that could be as well.
Those are great results. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Anthony. Um, just a quick rundown on the company information. We've been going for about 3 years now. We've got coming on 100 million shares on issue, and generally, sort of our market cap's coming on around 120 million, give or take, depending on day to day. I'm based up in Canada, despite my accents. I live up here and I spend most of my time in Whitehorse. I'm a geologist of 20 years experience and the president of Gladiator Metals, with sort of most relevant previous experience being a former principal geologist for First Quantum. Uh, I'm joined up in Whitehorse by our very experienced VP Exploration, Kel Nielsen, who's also based up there in Whitehorse, and he's got over 30 years of experience. The board might be familiar to a few people who invest in the TSX. So Sean Kunkun is a director, CEO of Dolly Varden. Darren Devine also is on the board of Dolly Varden and other TSX listed companies. Our CEO and director, Jason Bontempo, has over 20 years of public company management, corporate advisory, and investment banking experience, and has headed up multiple companies as well. As I mentioned, our cash position has changed a little bit from this. We're probably at around 22 million at the moment. And we've sort of got coming on around 5,000 options outstanding. Our last raise was done at 92 cents. And our current share price is probably around, I think when I checked it last, it was around $1.30. But as Anthony mentioned, that's been on a bit of a rise since roughly June last year, when I think we were around 40, 50 cents, and we've sort of been climbing since then. We're held about 30, about a third held by institutions, listed on the right there. A third by sort of either project vendors or insiders, directors, or associated investors, and then a third would be retail as well. So a good mix at this stage.
Hey, Marcus, while you're on this page, one of the questions is, are any options being exercised? I'm assuming considering the stock has done really well.
They haven't been exercised yet, but I think obviously you can see the options that exist there. Will be in the money. Well, we certainly anticipate them being the money on the time frame, so we'd anticipate them being exercised.
Okay, thank you.
But that's a long time frame through to 2030. The only other actually thing to mention, just whilst we're discussing share structure, is the project vendors. So the projects were vended to us by the Coyne family, who are Kwanlundun citizens, so belong to our local First Nations. They also run Kluane Drilling, which is a worldwide drilling company. I think they've got almost 200 rigs out worldwide, mostly through South America and North America. And they've also been directly investing in us as well. They've invested, I think it's almost 3 million of their own cash into us at the same time. But the reason I'm mentioning that is they have a further 5 million shares coming in February and a further 6 million shares in February 2029. And that's to close out the full option. So that's all that is required for Gladiator to move to 100% ownership of the project.
That's great. Thank you.
On to the next slide. So I'm just going to step into Cowley Park to start with. So just as we're talking about these prospects, there's a little inset map up on the top of the picture there, just showing you where we are. But we're generally going to be moving from the southeast through to the northwest. Cowley Park is really the first prospect that we started working on when we picked up the belt almost 3 years ago now. And the reason for that was I can't claim it was driven by anything anything insightful, particularly by us. It was basically it had the most advanced data sets left over from Hudbay's work on the project. It had been drilled over about 800 meters of strike, and we could see that it had the potential for 30 to 40 million tons, maintaining that sort of historical grade just from the historical drilling. So it was a good place for us to start as a junior, just starting out on a new project. It's also very close to surface, easily accessible all year round. So ticked a lot of boxes in terms of cost-efficient work programs as we were starting to raise money for the project. So we've probably put coming on 60,000 meters into this prospect now. And what you're looking at here is the pink is the isosurface of the granitoid. So as I mentioned, they're skarn deposits. So the principal driver for prospectivity is generally being in and around that contact. And you'll see there's sort of a pant legs appearance to the deposit. We've now defined it. We've done a bit more work since this, but we've defined it over about a strike length of 1.2 kilometers to date. Pink represents the 1% copper and above grade shells, and that represents just copper as well. So there are significant amounts of credits as well, in particular molybdenum, often over 0.1% molybdenum associated with the copper mineralization. And we're also starting to pick up more and more gold as we move to the east of the prospect area. In fact, one of our recent releases was, I think we drilled 12 meters at 2.7% copper in the southern limb just here, but it was also around 2.5 grams ton gold, coincident with that. So we have a good representation of 1% copper mineralization along the northern side of the deposit. That comes all the way to surface, and pretty much as a rule of thumb, we've drilled the deposit to about 150, 160 meters vertical depth. So we're still talking extremely shallow from what we've explored. It's also very much open to the northeast. Our last drill hole on this northern limb was 52 meters of 1.96% copper, along with I think about 0.6 gold as well. So mineralization very much open to the northeast. We've put a lot of work this year into drilling up the southern limb. As you can see in this image, the 0.5 and 1% mineralization looks rather patchy, but actually that's prior to our drilling. So that's a function of drill density rather than a true reflection of its continuity. And as I mentioned, we had that high grade hit in here, which would have been previously represented as a 0.2 shell, but now would be well in excess of 1% copper mineralization. We've also done further step outs on this southern limb, and I think we've stepping out a further 100 meters. We've intersected 13 meters of 1% copper and 0.7 gold as well. So very much open to the southeast, to the northeast. We've pretty much drilled the known mineralization, so this strike extent through to inferred status. We've probably got another 3,000 meters that we need to drill this year to get it over the line. But we're very much focused on stepping out, seeing how large this system truly could be, um, and working out its full potential before we start releasing that resource. To take a cross section through the deposit, just to give you a feel for what mineralization looks like. Generally, there's these two limbs either side of a central intrusive plug. Um, they're generally around 100 meters wide, and I find the best way to think of it is sort of 100 meters wide of around zero point 0.7 mineralization. So essentially, and that's as a skarn that can be quite variable between sort of 0.3 and 1.5% copper, but fairly consistently averages out to that zero point 0.7. But what really makes the deposit hum and what lifts the overall grade of what we're going to be releasing as a resource is that there's a late stage structurally controlled mineralization, which we can track. It's very coherent, it's discrete, and we're able to track it from drill hole to drill hole. And that's so. For example, on this slide, this is 98 meters of 1.5 in here, which is would be close to true width. But what's lifting that from the zero point 0.7 to the 1.5 is this 20 meters of 5.5% copper, which is that late stage structurally controlled mineralization. Similarly, up here, 80 meters of 1.4, but what's lifting it is the 26 at 3.3, which is that late overprinting phase. And that's actually an important factor for us as we start to review the rest of the district. These are the features that we're really looking for. We're finding it relatively easy to find skarn, relatively easy to find large ore bodies out along the trend. But what we're really focused on is making sure that our drill meters are going to be directed at areas with those high grade centers that we can really start to define higher grade resources from the start. And you can see it. Sorry, yes.
So I just want to, so one of the questions is, how do you prioritize step out drilling versus infill for resource definition?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I think up until now, our so if you imagine the sort of the first two years of life of the company, a typical junior, we're sort of doing smaller raises, 3 to 5 million. We were by necessity having to be fairly cautious, so step outs were pretty conservative, and we always sort of had one eye on the market in terms of releases. I would say that that's due to success. We've been able to start changing that. So we've been able to have a bit of a dual focus. So 2 rigs last year were focused on Cowley Park resource drilling infill, and 2 rigs were starting to get out to test new targets and see where the resource growth was going to be coming from. And I think that's going to be a similar picture to this year. We'll have 1 to 2 rigs working at Cowley Park, focused on pretty conservative step outs. We're talking 70 to 100 meters that can incrementally grow the resources, but are fairly conservative in terms of getting results, but also just a steady growth on the deposit. But with two rigs focused on more of those transformational exploration targets, so significant step outs that are going to put a multiplier on the size of Cowley Park, but also testing new targets out the belt, which could potentially also shift the size of the deposits we're looking for.
Great,
Excuse me,
thank you.
sorry.
Yep, thank
Yeah. The other significant thing that happened last year, yeah, apologies, I've got a bit of a cold, um, is we previously put a floor on mineralization based on the intrusive contact. So as we discussed, that's sort of our principal vector to where mineralization is. And generally, when we've drilled into the intrusion, we've stopped pretty close after crossing that contact. However, one of the things we noted was that there was a significant structure in the footwall of mineralization on this northern limb. And as I mentioned, we were starting to see those structurally controlled high grade zones as well. And we were starting to see that there was potentially a relationship between that structure and those high grade zones. And so we started to theorize that maybe that was sufficient to start introducing mineralization material into the intrusion itself. So we've drilled pretty much one hole so far, which is CPG 92, which was directed at intrusion hosted mineralization, proximal to that structure. And we hit around 130 meters of mineralization, including 55 meters at 0.7% copper and a nice, slightly higher grade zone of 22 meters at 1.3. Now, that's not by no means our most significant intercept on the project, but what it represents, there's a couple of things it represents. The first is it represents depth potential to Cowley Park. So essentially, our first hole below that 150-meter floor of drilling is still hitting mineralization. The other thing it represents is that when we've done internal pit optimizations, due to this sort of dual limb appearance to the deposit, we were starting to get doubly nested pit optimizations. But with mineralization essentially being found deep and central to that historical drilling, now those pits start to pull down around that mineralization as well. So it has a significant effect on the amount of economically recoverable mineralization as well that has potential at Cowley Park. But the other thing from a scientific perspective is so we've got this big structure dipping down, and we've got mineralization and high grade mineralization essentially bleeding off it and being controlled by it. And it's mineralizing across rock types. So essentially, the question it then asks is, well, where is this mineralization coming from? What's driving this? We can keep chasing that structure down dip, which is what this hole here was designed for, and obviously start to test the depth potential of Cowley Park mineralization itself. But there's potentially a significant driver to this system. Now that's most likely a sort of porphyry system, but it's not something that we're going to be going out there and just drilling for straight away. We've our focus is very much that 100 million tons of high grade, getting that onto the books first at 1%. But it also potentially represents the future of the project once we achieve that. So we've started to put a little bit of work and thought into it, drilling out on wide spacing mineralization, intrusive hosted mineralization below Cowley Park, and starting to use that to develop alteration and geochemical vectors that might point us towards where that porphyry mineralization is coming from. To step back on Cowley Park a little bit, so this is a recent gravity image. From work that we did in the latter part of last year. Now, the reason we look at this is that skarn mineralization is extremely dense. A factor of 50 times, 50% higher than the country rock. So there's a very good correlation between gravity highs and skarn mineralization in the district. And that's evidenced by pretty much the shape of Cowley Park as we know it is reflected by this gravity high here, which is what we've drilled. So this is our starter mineralization on the way to that 100 million tons at 1%. But we also defined undercover these new gravity highs to the south. We've put two holes into Cowley South, and it is a skarn. It is mineralized, and and crucially for us, it has evidence of those high grade features as well. So this has become an important target for us. But also, what's come through is this buried target here, which we've termed Great Southern, which is a gravity high of significant size, similar to Cowley Park. And we've also done further geophysical work, IP, over the top of it. And actually, we have a coincident chargeability anomaly. I'm sure I don't have to explain this, but chargeability essentially potentially represents sulfide content, which we would obviously hope is chalcopyrite or bornite, copper-bearing sulfides. Coincident with that. Now, the reason I mention it is because we're going to start stepping onto some of the other targets, and that combination of gravity and chargeability anomaly is really starting to deliver for us on the rest of the project as well. So we're very excited about the potential of Great Southern. So this is a look at another step back. So Cowley Park, you can see the gravity high here with coincident drilling over the top of it, and you can see how well the drilling matches that gravity high. This is the Cowley South area, that target that I mentioned we put 2 drill holes into that is also mineralized. But we've since extended the survey out to what we've termed the Cub Trend, which is about 2.5 kilometers to the west. At the Cub Trend, we have 2 historical mines, so at Keweenaw and Black Cub South. They were pretty small operations, generally around 40 meters deep, and I think around 150, 200,000 tons each came out of them at 1.5% copper. The gem area was also drilled. It was pre-strip for mining, but never mined. But there's probably around, when Hudbay left, they left around a 700,000 ton reserve at gem at around 1.5% copper as well. And there's drilling all down this trend with these are unmined results from that trend as well. So 16 at 2.6, 24 at 1.4, 30 at 1.2. But you can see they're all relatively shallow. But when we did our gravity out here, we started to find actually our gravity high was displaced from the trend that had been drilled. So we then decided to put IP, which is these 4 lines, over the top, and we developed this chargeability anomaly, which are these 2 lines highlighted in red, over about 850 meters, which had never been drilled before, and was displaced from the mining and drill trend out to the west. Now, the reason this is exciting is we put five holes into it pretty much as our last gasp at the end of last year, late November, early December. And all 5 of those holes hit mineralization within about 10 meters of where we'd projected it from the IP, with the best hole being 44 meters of 1.7 and almost a gram a ton gold. But one of the key features is that all of the 5 holes have these higher grade cores. So mineralization generally around 1.5%, but with a nice high grade core, 27 meters of 2.6% copper, and a gram and a half gold, 7.3 at almost 3% copper, 5.1 at almost 3% copper as well. So we've now defined mineralization over about 350 meters with those 5 drill holes. We've defined it down depth about 300 meters, and it's looking like it's going to be 20 to sort of 40 meters thick. These are almost true thickness. So we're already finding something that's got good future resource potential, really good consistency over 5 holes. The anomalism is open for at least another the same again in terms of strike length, and just in terms of multiplying those numbers together, it looks like we're looking at a sort of 10 million ton target at around 1.5% based on only what we've drilled so far. So almost double that, and completely open if we can succeed in extending that through the chargeability anomaly to the southeast. So we're really excited about this target. It's still very shallow, within sort of 120 meters of surface, and we've got a further chargeability anomaly and coincident gravity high that remains undrilled to the northeast. So getting out to this is a bit of a priority for us this year. It's completely clear. It's been clear felled for a fire break, so we have essentially unrestricted access to where we place drill holes, and it's something that could come together pretty quickly with our budget in terms of a maiden resource as well. So we're very excited about that one. If I step further up the belt, so another 12 kilometers, this is the historical mining district. So 8.5 million tons at 1.5% came out of the Little Chief deposit just here. But there is a residual ore body called Middle Chief up here, which is, these are some of the residual unmined results. So 49 at 3, 54 at 2, 41 at 2.2. And it represents probably around, we've done some internal numbers, probably 6-7 million tons at at 1.5% that's unmined from historical operations. It's still relatively shallow. This is an isometric view of it. So the 8.5 million tons mined is this salmon pink area, and the 7 million tons residual is this dark pink area. But it's still only been drilled to about 250 meters vertical, so still relatively shallow. We did put some holes into it a couple of years ago, and that was to confirm that it was residual. We intersected mineralization where we were expecting, but drilling was I've got to be honest, drilling was pretty terrible. Our all-in costs went up a lot, and that's the reason why we stepped away from this and prioritized Cowley Park. Particularly when we had restricted budgets, we were much more cost effective in terms of defining tons at Cowley Park. So the approach we took was, well, let's step back and let's start to see what these two deposits represent in terms of more global potential in the area. So we took a similar approach. We did gravity over the area, and these hotter colors essentially represent gravity highs. We've drilled a few of these highs now, and every single one is a skarn. Every single one is mineralized. And so now we have potential to find over about 2 kilometers on this western limb and over about 1.5 kilometers on the eastern side as well. And if you think about that, this gravity high here represents 7 million tons. We've obviously got a lot more exciting potential taking shape out to the west. There's also a drill hole down in this gravity high to the historical drill hole. Sorry, I've lost my mouse. Where's it gone? Down to the southeast. Hang on, hold on a sec, sorry. Down to the southeast here, which is 14 meters of 5% copper and 4 grams a ton gold as well, which hasn't been followed up on. So a lot of potential, future potential from this district. As you can see, this is the haul road running through the property, so it can be accessed all year round. And we're very excited about this 2 kilometer long trend out to the west, which we've drilled with a couple of holes and is a mineralized skarn as well. We're also pretty excited about the larger scale potential of this district. So we essentially have done drilling that amounts to a single section line across these gravity highs. And we've got a pretty similar picture to Cowley Park. So a central intrusive plug with mineralized skarns to both margins of that plug. We drilled a hole across the central intrusion as well, just to see what that looked like. And we actually intersected in that hole. We intersected around 40 meters of quartz chalcopyrite moly veining with K-spar selvages hosted inside the intrusion, which was of interest to us, especially as these are untargeted drill holes. But then we also intersected 15 meters of 0.9% copper, which was hosted in massive chalcopyrite veins between 1 and 30 centimeters thick. Essentially completely untargeted, a first drill hole into the intrusion just to see what it looked like. So the fact that we intersected a significant mineralization was hugely encouraging to us and suggests that there's further potential for mineralization outside of the skarns inside the intrusion in this area as well. Again, we're probably a long way off from being able to deliver the full potential of that. Our focus is delivering near-term resources from the near-surface skarns, focusing on that higher grade 1%. But it does mean that we're starting to explore, well, what could be driving this system again? So similar to Cowley Park, we're drilling systematic fences spaced around 1.5 kilometers apart, and using alteration and geochemical vectoring to start to tell us what might be driving this system. The last prospect I'll touch on, just because I'm aware it's throwing a lot at everybody. Stepping a further 5 kilometers up to the northwest, we have mineralization defined at the Arctic Chief Trend over about that's actually defined over about 2 kilometers. So bearing in mind the Cowley Park's about 1.2 kilometers, it's got significant resource potential. It has been drilled historically to a depth of about 40 meters. over the best chance and grafter areas. And that's about sort of 250, 300 meters of strike alone. These are some of those residual results. So 51 at zero point 0.7, 14 at 1.3, 31 at 4. Historically, they didn't assay for credits, so they're true just copper mineralization. But I think the thing to note is that these are all extremely shallow results. Talking from 12 meters, 46 meters, 54 meters down a hole. So still very much exploring that top 50 to 100 meters of depth. We also, when we started working on this area last year, we defined a further 350 meters of strike to the north of that area. And our first holes into that, we drilled 77 meters of 0.7% copper, but again, pretty much from surface, from immediately as we hit fresh rock at 2.75 meters below surface. And we've also drilled 52 at 0.75 and 43 at 0.65 as well. So we've essentially defined mineralization already over a strike length equivalent to that at Cowley Park. But what really excites us about this area is mineralization dips under cover through this low central area and then reappears where outcrop appears to the south. And we've had significant intercepts there as well, some of which are listed on the left here. So 25 at zero point 0.6 with 1.24 gold as well. We've tracked geology through there and it's continuous. We've also done gravity through there and we have a continuous gravity high running the full length of this area. So our approach on this is to come back with some systematic drilling, infill the central part of this drill area and show that there's potential for continuity over 2 kilometers and that this area should be ranked up there with Cowley Park, the new discovery at Cub East, and the Arctic Chief Trend as well. So what does that mean for the year? What do we look like? As I mentioned, we've still got sorry about this. We've still got $22 million in the bank. We've budgeted around 50,000 meters for 2026. That's going to be between 3 and 4 drill rigs out at any one time, with a mix of focus, as somebody asked the question earlier. There'll be a focus on Cowley Park of delivering resources, as well as testing its upside to those initial resources. I would say we're probably 95% along the road to that already. It'll also be starting to be directed towards drilling some of these other areas, the new discovery at Cub East, testing its full strike potential, the new mineralization defined at Arctic Chief, and the new mineralization defined at the Chief's Trend as well, and starting to bring those areas forward to a sort of similar position to what Cowley Park represents at the moment. So in terms of news flow, we've just released that new discovery at Cub East. And at the beginning of this week, we released significant intervals from infill drilling at Cowley Park. And then we're going to be having rigs starting to go out in the next couple of weeks. And we'll be pretty aggressive with the drill bit over the remainder of the year. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, great. If anyone has any questions, please type them into the Q&A or chat box. We already have a bunch of questions in queue, Marcus, so I'm going to hit your rapid fire if you don't mind.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
But fantastic results. Looking forward to 2026. I really encourage everyone to take a long, hard look at everything, all the results that that Gladiator has put out here in the last year or so. They're fantastic, and Whitehorse has a ton of potential. So really dig into those numbers. All right, ready, Marcus? Is there an opportunity to expand the land package since you are pretty much the only ones in the area?
Yes, there definitely is. We've made sure that we've staked all known occurrences essentially within the district. We've set ourselves sort of an operational boundary at the moment based on our First Nations partnerships. So essentially, we've made sure that we've staked all known occurrences that were available within their traditional territories, essentially as an area exclusion for others entering the district. And we do incrementally increase our land holding, um, but it'll be based around work being driven forward, I think.
Okay, great. Um, will you need to raise capital within the next year? What milestones can you hit with your current cash position?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one we certainly talk about internally a lot. As I mentioned, at the moment we've got $22 million. Around 15 or 16 of that is flow through, so will have to be spent this year. And when we talk about that 50,000 meters of drilling this year, that just represents that $16 million. So we do have capacity already to significantly upscale that drilling program based on the cash we have available. But I think yeah, almost certainly as we start to release results, we have a couple of significant catalysts in terms of potential resource announcements or new discoveries or expansion of discoveries we've already made. And depending how the year goes, I think we'll continuously review whether there's an opportunity to expand programs and take some more money. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you give us some color on your Class 3 permit? Does this depend on the type of your rigs, or is it related to extended time duration? Will this be needed on all your projects?
Yeah. So yeah, just to delve into that a little bit. So we've been operating to date under what's called a Class 1 permit, which does allow us to drill throughout the properties, especially as we have pretty well established access to most of the target areas that we're well, all of the target areas we've discussed today, but most of the target areas throughout the prospect as well. However, there are certain restrictions to that class one. It limits the amount of drilling that you can do, or amount of drill holes that you can do within sort of a claim area. So it's sufficient for reconnaissance, and it can be sufficient for resource. I mean, we've got Cowley Park to almost almost through to resources based on only on those class ones. But a class three allows a lot more drill holes per sort of unit area, as it were. So that's what we've been moving towards. That's a fairly involved process. We've probably been at it a good 6 to 7 months, which is in line with the time frame that others in the Yukon take as well. And there's a couple of significant milestones to that. The first is obviously First Nations approval and support, and one of the things we're really proud about on this project is that we have very good relationship with our First Nations territory owners. Um, and so that's the first stage. The second is, as part of the class three, it goes through a public consultation process. Um, and we've got through that. We were actually the most commented and involved public consultation process I think there's ever been in the Yukon, with more respondents and people involved in that. And I'm pretty pleased to say we've gone through the sort of all of the comments, and it was probably around 60% were positive. 30% had concerns that they'd like to have addressed in the class three, and then of course there was a portion that's probably always going to be against. But we're very pleased that we got through that with a lot of public support. And then we're anticipated timeline on the issuing of the class three is probably the next couple of months, without wanting to put a specific date on it. But getting that class three, to come back to the question, will allow us a lot more sort of allow us to do a lot more focused drilling. So we can already get everywhere we need to drill, but this will allow us to do more focused drilling in certain areas.
Great, thank you for that. And speaking of First Nations, one of the questions is, what do you see as the biggest risk to reaching your goals? Any issues with First Nations? So that doesn't seem like it's going to be an issue, but in your opinion, what do you see as the biggest risk?
Um, well, I think yeah, the First Nations, like, yeah, as I say, we've put a lot of work into that. We take their concerns very seriously, and we put a lot of time into outreach. We've also benefited from the fact that the project vendors are First Nations citizens. Their drilling company is First Nations owned as well. So we've obviously been we've made a big significant commitment to the district within their traditional territory. The other advantage of the prospect is of the project is that as a historical mining district, it's got over 40 years of sort of baseline data that's been collected on the project. So 40 years of water monitoring downstream from operations, 40 years of monitoring of the waste dumps, and 40 years of monitoring of the tails dams as well. So it's got a good baseline of data to be working from. The mineralization is hosted, so the sulfides are hosted essentially within a carbonate, so it's self-buffering, so there's no acid mine drainage. We do full multi-element suites, so there's nothing deleterious associated, well, nothing sort of harmful or deleterious associated with the mineralization. We frequently assay for always assay for arsenic, and we always assay for uranium, and there's none of that noted in any of our assays or coincident with mineralization. So from an environmental perspective, not a lot of risk. One thing I would say, so we're obviously affected by First Nations governance, which we've got a pretty positive relationship with, Yukon government as a whole, which I think most people would be familiar with that. It is a mining territory. Mining is very well understood by most people who live there. I mean, I mean, just as if you'll allow me an anecdote, we had a community open house a week after the Victoria Gold's sort of heap leach collapse. And going into that, we got asked the question, well, what's the likelihood of heap leach operations here? And all I had to say was, well, it's sulfide from surface, be most likely flotation circuits, and everyone in the room understood what that meant, which I don't think you can say that about many parts of the world. So Yukon government broadly supportive, and in fact, there's been a recent change in government, and the Yukon Party has, very much been driving mining as future growth for the territory. Part of the properties sit within the city of Whitehorse municipality. So that includes the historical operations at the Chief area, and basically everything north of the Cub Trend. But we've been pretty involved with the city, being very very open, discussing things with them, and we've been operating within the city boundary for the past 3 years. So we don't see that as a near-term risk to the project either. So in terms of identifying a risk, I mean, there's nothing I would particularly highlight. As outside of continuing to operate to best practices and respecting the environment and the territory in which we work.
Yeah, that's really all you can do
Yeah.
at this point. Yeah. Given Cowley's historical legacy as mine, are there any licenses in place from prior production period? Do you expect the historical production to make any necessary licensing faster?
Yeah, so Cowley wasn't mined. So that's an unmined prospect. But yeah, obviously there is the mine at the Chiefs area. There's nothing. I wouldn't have thought so. I think we'd probably be starting again from scratch in that process. I mean, there are a few things like the Tails Dam existing, but they're actually off our properties. So the only thing I would point to is infrastructure is largely in place. There's a haul road running through the property. There's power lines on the property. There's a highly skilled workforce within an hour's drive of most parts of the property. So I think in terms of that, And there's power on our doorstep as well. I mean, there's a hydro facility in Whitehorse. So I mean, but outside of those kind of structural advantages, the other one would be improving the port of Skagway in Alaska. That's about an hour and a half's drive away, and that's where all of the concentrate from the Yukon currently goes out of, and has historically gone out of. I mean, I would say just in terms of locational and situational advantages, Anthony.
Great. Yep. Thank you for that. Marcus, it seems you're aggressively drilling to ramp up the resource, which in my mind is appropriate. In your opinion, where are you improving up your resource? In what inning would you say?
I would say that I would say that the defined boundaries of Cowley Park are probably around 95% drilled out already. So we've got a fairly good idea of what that size is going to be, um, and what the grade is going to be. I think, but I think before we start releasing that, we'd like to do that additional 5-10% of drilling, which probably only represents two to, somewhere between 2 to 5,000 meters, let's say. Because a lot of that drilling that needs to be done is actually just bringing ore bodies to surface. So there's, if I can skip back to the Cowley Park image, so you can see. Sorry. So you can see this area here, for instance, that I'm highlighting with my mouse. We've got that. It's 58 meters of 1.94 defined here, and it just simply hasn't been drilled up to surface. So that represents basically a high grade limb that we can start to extend up. But so very much low hanging fruit, incremental additions, which I think we would certainly want to get done before we put the resource out. So
Great.
hopefully that answers the question.
Yes.
But at the same time, we can do the significant step outs and just make sure that we're testing the full potential of it, rather than, I think we're cautious that if we released Cowley Park as is at the moment, it might be putting a false line in the sand in terms of its size potential, in terms of market perception. I think we'd like to make sure that we can demonstrate that not only is Cowley likely bigger than that, but also there's going to be resources coming from other parts of the trend as well.
Great. As you develop the belt, does the geology suggest mainly copper? Is it too early to say? Are there any gold or moly mines in your neighborhood?
Um, there's I mean, the nearest sort of deposit within the same terrain is probably Red Chris in BC, which obviously has significant gold credits as well. I would say we are, like, the more work we're doing, the more gold we're seeing. I think prior to probably the middle of last year, we wouldn't have had many intervals over a gram a ton gold, but we're starting to see them a lot more frequently. Part of that is actually because, so one end of the Cowley resource is more moly rich, so out to started drilling it. And as we move to the east, we're starting to see gold increasing as well. So part of it is just simply, as we extend drilling to the east, we seem to be coming into a gold-rich domain. But the other factor is that the new discovery at Cub East has a significant gold credit to it as well. So I think as we drill that out, we'll be seeing more too.
Great. Do you have any, are you obligated to pay any royalties once Gladiator is in production?
Yes, we do have royalties. We have, but it's mostly around 2%. 1% of which is owned by the project vendors, and 1% owned, not sorry, yeah, 1% owned by these NSRs, owned by historical operators.
Okay, great. Let's see here. When do you think you'll have a resource?
So we've sort of set ourselves an internal objective of being resource ready by certainly the end of Q2 this year, so middle of this year. Um, the caveat to that would be if we're seeing significant extensions or if resources are rapidly coming together in some of the other areas, we might push that date out to make sure it's a better reflection. But that's sort of the internal target we've set ourselves.
Which is the follow-up question is how much more drilling will you do before getting to a PEA? So after the resource, when do you think you can define a PEA? Do you think that's in 2027 at some point, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it comes back to the kind of the exploration target we've set ourselves. That 100 million tons at whilst maintaining that 1% copper from the skarns. I think if we see ourselves advancing on that target by the end of year, then that's going to be our driver, and it'll really depend on uh, on how close we are to that, and if we're exceeding that as well. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little bit difficult to answer, but I think we'd be wanting to move towards that as quickly as possible.
What size and grade range are you targeting for your resource?
So in terms of range, and I would say that this is for Cowley Park alone. So only what we know of Cowley Park. So what we've drilled to date, I think we're fairly comfortable. We'll be sort of between 30, 40 million tons. And as I mentioned, we'd like to be as close as we can to that 1% copper equivalent for that as well.
Great. And you talked about how the meters, the drill program in 2026 on that last page. What does the overburden look like? Do you see this as open pit or underground?
So we certainly see it, I think, more likely as open pit at this stage. Mineralization's from surface, the grade is from surface. There's not much in terms of complex metallurgy, which actually is something I haven't spoken about, but probably should. There's not much, but there's no sort of real oxidation profile or anything like that. And to date, drilling is really we've rarely exceeded about 150 meters vertical with our drilling, so we're still talking extremely shallow and at open pitable depths. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
then if we can start to define those higher grade centers, some of which are shown on the left there, 26 at 3.6, 27 at 3, 58, 11 at 6. If we can start to define continuity on those structurally controlled zones, then there is some potential for open pit being them driving underground rather at some stage as well.
Great, thank you for that. Since Western Canada has no major copper refinery, where would you smelt your concentrate? Trudeau did not want concentrates to Asia.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, I would very much like to have that problem to deal with. Historically, the concentrates went to Japan. Um, uh, so I'm not sure where they would be going at this stage. But one of the things to say is that historically producing the concentrate going out the gate was in a bad month was 43% copper, and in a good month was 48% copper. So it was a very, very clean, high grade con. Like I mentioned, there's no sort of arsenic or anything deleterious that went along with that concentrate either. So I'd imagine a clean, high grade con of that tenor is going to have a market.
Absolutely. And last question, analyst coverage. Any update from Coremark, which I presume is paid coverage, do their projections dovetail with Beacon and Exploration Insights?
Yeah, so Beacon was actually a very early supporter of the project. So that analyst coverage is probably um, a little bit out of date. Cormark's is fairly recent and would dovetail with what we're seeing as well. Joe Mazendar, Exploration Insights, he pays very close attention. We probably speak to him every couple of months, and he's up at least once a year, often twice a year as well.
Great. We're going to leave it there. I want to thank Marcus for coming on and getting everybody up to speed on Gladiator Metals. Great time to look at the company, especially with all the anticipated milestones and announcements, all the drilling they're going to be doing this year. We expect them to continue to find copper wherever they drill, and now there's a gold element to this as well. So very exciting stuff. Before I wrap it up, Marcus, any parting words for our guests?
No, I think we've covered everything, but I'd just like to, well, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, Anthony, for organizing.
No, it's my pleasure. And in the meantime, you can get additional information on Gladiator Metals at the company's comprehensive website, gladiatormetals.com, including details on the company's current projects, as well as the latest press releases.